Joshua, I'm almost at the setting of the text. In the book of Joshua, the Lord strikes up an interesting conversation with Joshua. He does this now. He says to Joshua, he says, Moses, my servant, is dead. What an interesting segue. What an interesting lead in into a conversation. Moses, my servant, is dead. He says, but Joshua, I don't want you to cry. I don't want you to mourn. He says, but what I want you to do is get up. Look at somebody and tell them, get up. He says, get up and go over this Jordan. Now touch everybody you can reach and tell them, get over it. You get over it. Tell them it happened 10 years ago. Get over it. The man left you. He already got another family. Get over it. Your daughter already had the baby. Get over it. Your son is already in prison. Get over it. You lost your car. So what? Get over it. Look at somebody and tell them, get over it. In order for you to get to what God has next on his agenda, it's some things you got to get over. Look at somebody and tell them, get over it, baby. It's holding you back. It's hindering you from what God had coming. High five your neighbor and tell them, get over it. Sit now. He says to Joshua, he says, I want you to get up and go over this Jordan. He says to Joshua, he says, every place now, the sole of your foot tread, he says, I'm going to give it to you. In other words, Joshua, if you can walk on it, you can have it. Is there anybody here got some stuff that God promised you? I hear the Lord say, he says, if you can walk on it, you can have it. Now, I told you I'm 50 years old. I was born and raised in the country, but I grew up in the church now. When we had demonstrations, signs and wonders. I grew up when people literally took God at his word. I remember when the saints, they saw a car that they wanted to drive. They had enough faith to go to the car dealership and just walk around it. I said, I remember when the saints said, I want that house right there. And they would just walk around. Look at your neighbor and tell them, neighbor, you better walk it out. Tell them, walk it out. Walk it out. Walk it out. Because if you can walk on it, you can have it. If you believe it, wave those hands and help me say it's mine. So now, in verse 5, and I'm almost there. In verse 5, God assures Joshua that he was going to bless him. And he says to him, as I was with Moses, so shall I be with thee. Let me take a moment to remind you that regardless to how difficult the times are, you may have been affected by the global economical crisis. You may be experiencing corporate downsizing, cutback, layoff, and yet, yes, even foreclosures. But I need to remind you that there is no shortages in God's economy. I need for you to know that God does not participate